Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Forbes staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has been a little busy over the past few days trying to wrangle members of his party to vote for a Trump-backed budget resolution. It did go into effect, but you're reporting that he's shirking on some other responsibilities as it relates to the Office of Congressional Conduct. Explain what you found.
Sure. So the Office of Congressional Conduct used to be called the Office of Congressional Ethics, and the House was able to change its name, but they still haven't this session, but they still haven't gotten around to actually staffing the board and approving the board. And without a board, this office is hamstrung. It cannot do much. It cannot launch investigations. It can't move investigations from one stage to another. It can't forward investigations to the House Committee on Ethics, which is the bipartisan group that actually has the power to sanction lawmakers. So they are really hamstrung here. All that needs to happen is the Speaker needs to appoint 4 members of the board. The Democrats have put forward their 2 names. There are Republicans who served on the office's board in the past. They have agreed to do it again. Literally, all that needs to happen, my sources say, is their names need to be read out loud in a pro forma session of Congress, and we will have a functioning board and that office can get back to work. But that hasn't happened.
Talk to us about some of that previous work. What has this board looked into? What are some of their most notable investigations?
So the case that stands out the most is that of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democrat from New York. She famously wore that the rich dress to the Met Gala. We later learned that she got a very cheap rate on that. And, that was designer couture from a designer whose work is in Vogue. And there were a lot of other, photo shoot, a lot of other preparation for that Met Gala that also looks like that she, may have gotten a good deal on. And that they took from the Office of Congressional Ethics, just referred that investigation to the House Committee on Ethics. So that's probably the most famous investigation that they've been working on. And, right now, they can only continue to look at investigations that have already been approved. It's ridiculous. In the process of reporting this story, I went to look at how many cases they've worked on. And quarterly reports don't name names, but they have numbers. They can't even provide the numbers for the fourth quarter of the last Congress because they need a board to sign off on that, and they don't have a board. So, that's just really how hamstrung this group is right now.
But until then, in Q1, Q2, and Q3 of last year, how many investigations did they look into? What does their work really look like?
Yeah, so there were 23 investigations preliminary reviews that they looked at. So they start off with these preliminary reviews. Is this something that's going to be worth our time? If they decide it is, then it would move to a second phase. And if that continues, they would then launch a investigation, like a full-on investigation. And at the end, if the board finds substantial reason to believe that an ethics rule was violated, they will then pass that on to the House Committee on Ethics, which is the bipartisan congressional committee charged with oversight of members of the chamber.
You and I have talked about that before, and whenever there's a board or committee talking about their colleagues' ethics or conduct, people aren't really jumping at the opportunity to be a part of that because no one wants to snitch on a coworker, is what you and I have come to the conclusion of. But you're saying that there are some people willing to serve on this. Speaker Mike Johnson just needs to get their names to be set on the House floor. Is there any indication as to why that hasn't happened yet?
No, and I think why people might be willing to serve on this is this is a group of nonpartisan people. They are, half of the board is appointed by Democrats and half by Republicans. These aren't members of Congress anymore. They can't be members of Congress. They are, some ex-Congress people. You have a former House clerk who's on this. And, that I think is why you're willing to see people, put their names forward for this. So I reached out to Speaker Johnson's office. I didn't get a response. No, is this just an oversight? Did he have problems with the 2 Republicans who put their names forward? Maybe that's not who he really wants in that position. Is he intentionally slow walking House ethics? We don't really know. One person you can speak to that, and they didn't respond.
And so there are some Republicans, as you're saying, willing to serve. Are there Democrats too, or is this just a Republican board?
Yeah, no, it is. It is split. It is the Democrat by statute. Half of the members of the board are nominated by Democrats, the other half by the Republicans. And yeah, there are Democrats ready to serve. The Democrats put their names forward. I believe it was last week. So we do have two people who are there. Yeah.
And you've reported before that Republicans have tried to reduce this office's power. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, they really tried to gut it all together in 2017. Stepping up to fight them on that was the notable ethically challenged Donald Trump, who actually put out there saying, like, this office might have some issues, but this isn't what we need to focus on. And they eventually walked that back, and the office continued to live to see another day. And then what they did at the last time they had control of Congress was they put in term limits for the board members, which you might think, okay, that's fair. Well, the term limits had the effect of immediately removing Democratic board members, but not any Republican ones. So the Democrats then had to come up with some new names to get appointed, and they eventually did that. But that was sort of seen as a move just to kind of kneecap the board a little bit there and hamstring the Democrats.
And in your piece, you noted that this follows really a larger trend of the Trump administration trying to weaken government oversight. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, we're really in a period here of the groups controlling government, which would be Republicans, of all three branches, really trying to weaken independent watchdog, independent agencies. Trump fired the Democratic chair of the FEC, as we discussed previously. He signed an executive order to give the president supervisory authority over agencies that used to be independent, including the SEC. They are seeing some of these challenged in courts, and they're certainly leading to some protests. But, by and large, you are seeing the independence of these groups really get taken away here during the Republican control of government.
Zach Everson, per usual, I appreciate our conversations. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.